We are having such a screwy winter here where I live. I live in the Black Hills of South Dakota. I'm by Mount Rushmore. And so our weather is mountain west. It's kind of like the Front Range of Colorado. You get some warm winter stuff. But generally speaking, I know that the tree across the street turns bright red about a week before Halloween. And then my similar tree turns bright red about a week after their tree turns bright red. And there's just predictability and rhythm to the fall. And then in the spring, I know that when certain plants in my backyard pop with a little bit of green here or there, you see the buds come up. It's like, oh, that's pretty much it for all of the snow. And maybe we'll get a crazy spring storm, but now we're definitely into the warming phase. And next it's going to be that tree and then that tree and then that tree. And you can just predict things. Even if you didn't have a calendar, the rhythms of the natural world around you tell you how things are. And I'm sure it's the same way wherever you live. You live anywhere long enough and you can just look out the window and be like, smells like March. Or, ooh, I walked outside at night and the parking lot is steaming. Oh, it's thaw day. The ground is warming up. That means we can expect this next. Well, the people of the distant past were the same way, maybe even more the same way. They were probably more sensitive to it than we are. And they saw all these rhythms and they could predict things and they knew what it was like when something was a little bit anomalic, and they probably would note it and be like, oh, that's strange. Look, this thing is doing this thing this year. And that's what's been going on with our bonkers winter here, is that we've had 3 warm-up periods for like 3 or 4 days, and stuff is like, should we turn green? And I'm out there snapping pictures of them. I'm like, oh, this is so weird. I got to show my friends because we shouldn't be getting these little green shoots here. And then it snows and freezes. And it's like, oh, no, never mind. We're not quite ready yet. We'll come back out later and try it again. Well, this pattern of predictability, this ability that all people have to interpret the basic signs of nature around them, to read what's going on, is something that Jesus latches onto to make a point to his original audience here in Matthew chapter 24:32. He's talking about the end of all things and how time is going to progress toward that and what the signs are going to be like. He just got done talking about an inarguable sign. It's like, after all this stuff has happened, you'll see the Son of Man returning on the clouds. And that's not really a sign. That's more like, oh, well, there he is. That's real because there's a guy and he's on the clouds, and that's abnormal. And so then he pivots into this next part about seasons and growth and stuff like that we're talking about. And it would seem that in doing so, he's pivoting this whole conversation away from the subject matter he has been dealing with, which is an answer to the disciples' question, what are going to be the signs of the end of things, of the return of the Son of Man. He answers that in 3 or 4 parts, talking about things that are just going to happen along the way, some great profaning of a holy thing, some difficult time of tribulation, and then the return of the Son of Man. It's like, there's your answer. I laid it all out. It's not as specific as the disciples surely wanted, but that's what I'm willing to give you. And now he's pivoting toward a new tone that is like, hey, you got this. You guys can read this stuff. You can interpret the weather. You can interpret what's going on with the unfolding of history. But the call seems to be toward faithfulness and trust in God, that in the rearview mirror, all of these things will make perfect focused sense. But in the meantime, doing what you do and being what you're supposed to be as a kingdom citizen is how it works. That was a really long way to get us to the part where I actually read the text in Matthew 24:32. It goes like this. Now learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know that summer is near. Even so, when you see all these things, you know that it is near, right at the door. I tell you the truth, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. Now, this passage, maybe more than any other that we've looked at in our little journey through the book of Matthew, breaks down neatly into one part that's crazy easy and one part that is historically very, 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 very difficult. So let's deal with the easy part real quick, which is just the fig tree business. I mean, we already kind of covered this stuff, and I'm embarrassed. Maybe I don't have Matthew in my hip pocket. I don't remember where it is. Is it 15? I think it's 15. Right? No, it's the beginning of 16. We already covered one example of where Jesus is talking to his original audience. He's like, you guys can interpret the weather. You can interpret day and night and clouds. You know how that works. You should be able to interpret the unfolding of things as predicted in the Old Testament, as attested to by nature. And so you'll recall the Pharisees and Sadducees came to Jesus, and they're asking in a similar vein a question like the disciples are asking in chapter 24, but the Pharisees and Sadducees specifically are interested in Jesus showing them a sign from heaven, like right now. When evening comes, you say it'll be fair weather, for the sky is red, and in the morning, today it will be stormy, for the sky is red and overcast. You know how to interpret the appearance of the sky, but you can't interpret the signs of the times? wicked and adulterous generation looks for a miraculous sign, but none will be given it except the sign of Jonah. I say this a lot right now because we got more Matthew in the rearview mirror than we have ahead of us, but we broke that down in great detail, and you can go and check out those episodes in chapter 16 if you want. But it was pretty easy back then to figure out what he meant. He was saying, come on, you guys can read these signs. Everybody knows how that works. Likewise, these signs that point toward the end of things or the reality of God's presence here and what's going on in this momentous moment of the kingdom, and it's pretty evident as well. If you guys can't see it, you're just being stubborn. So this then is pretty cleanly the second time where Jesus is like, look, I know these seem like really big, heady theological questions that make you pull your hair out and think real hard and try to figure out what it all means and read the signs and the thumbtacks and the red yarn and the newspaper clippings and the basements with the flickering fluorescent lights, but it's not that hard. It's like just looking outside and being like, well, is there a bunch of snow on the ground? And when you walk on the ground, is it all frozen and stuff? And are all the plants brown still? Okay, well, then you probably got a few weeks left of winter. Like, nobody'd hurry. But do you see a few green shoots coming up? Well, you see that going on for a couple of weeks. You're probably onto something, and you know that you're just about past the snow and into the spring the same way. That is very, very evident. Might take a little bit of attentiveness, but in broad strokes, it's very evident. So, this unfolding of history and the completion of the story that God has been predicting throughout the Old Testament, throughout all of history, is really not all that complicated from a what you need to know perspective as well. In other words, disciples, my friends, I know that seemed like a lot. You asked a big question. I gave you a big answer. There will be some things that you will be able to see unfolding, the signs of the times. It will look like the signs of the season, I suppose, in a way. And you'll have a sense that things are getting near, the same way that you can look outside and not have a precise sense of exactly what day on the calendar it is given the weather, but you got a sense that you're getting close to the transition from one season to the next by looking in broad strokes at what's going on outside your window. And I, for one, love that we get this addendum right here. Have you noticed this pattern throughout the book of Matthew? Or it's like Jesus, who's a master reader of the room, can always tell when he's getting to that place that's right at the end of what people can follow him with. And then he always comes back with this little reassurance like, hey, but you got this thing. Like, hey, I'll be with you always till the end of the age. Oh, that makes us feel better because you just gave us a huge job. That one's coming up a little bit later on in chapter 28. And this is definitely one of those places where Jesus knows dang well that it's given to the Father to know all of these things about the dates and the exact times, about how all of history will unfold at the same time. He knows dang well it's a reasonable question. The people who are going to take the baton and carry this thing forward into history and out into the world to their deaths, well, for at least 11/12 of them, out into the world to their grisly deaths. It makes perfect sense that they would want to know some kind of timeline, like, how long do I have to hold my breath? How far down underwater am I actually going here? You would want to know that before you dive into that difficult situation. So what you just got through the first chunk of chapter 24 is an understandable question with an understandable answer with an understandable degree of specificity and lack thereof that may be unsatisfying to the disciples. And Jesus follows it up with hey, you got this. You guys know what's going on around you. You're good at interpreting things. And in the same way that the signs are very evident when you're getting close to a seasonal change, so the signs will be plenty evident, and you will see what you need to see in order to be and do and position the way you need to be and do and be positioned. I like it because I'm a follower of Jesus. I want to be a kingdom citizen. I want to respond to what he said here in Matthew 24 and take it seriously. And if you don't have this little fig tree bit that we just read here today, well, it might be so overwhelming that you come away feeling like, I think I understood some of what you said there, Jesus, but I'm not sure I would even know exactly what it would look like to follow you or be on board with that at this point. And then ever so deftly, he just gives us this little reassuring parable that puts it all back into perspective, which is then immediately followed by something that I don't think would have been terribly confusing or difficult to the original audience, but that does raise a whole new question for us that, despite it being a historically contested, oft viewed as difficult verse, I don't think it's actually that difficult at all. And I think we are going to be able to sort through it pretty neatly tomorrow and move on forward into the next stuff Jesus is saying. Final note, if you felt some of that overwhelmed feeling here in chapter 24 that you haven't felt in other parts of our journey through the book of Matthew, I want to encourage you. First, I want to congratulate you for sticking with it because this is a commitment. You're still here. Not all of this is easy, but that ebb and flow is a very real thing. And now I want to encourage you to be chin up and eyes up as we head into the next stuff, because I think the rest of 24 and 25 lend a lot of clarity, read a lot of clarity back into what we just worked very hard to get through in the first half of 24. I'm glad we're on this journey together. I like you, and I like that you're up for this. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.